The first shots were never meant to be fired. In the doctrines of the consensus, war was an obsolete concept, an inefficiency solved ages ago by psionic dominance. Conflict ended before it began, dissent dissolved in shared understanding. Fleets existed for deterrence, not destruction. And yet, along the human frontier, weapons powered up. The trigger was minor, insignificant by galactic standards. A consensus patrol entered a contested system near human space, its presence meant as reassurance to a neighboring client species. The humans had charts marking the system as neutral. They transmitted warnings. The consensus did not respond. Psionic contact was attempted instead. It failed. Human commanders reported a strange phenomenon. Targeting sensors flickered, not from interference, but from absence. No psionic pressure, no intent to negotiate, just silence where the consensus expected submission. When the patrol crossed the final exclusion line, a human frigate fired a warning shot. The consensus interpreted it as madness. They responded with psionics. Across the human fleet, officers braced for mental assault. Many felt it: pressure, vertigo, the sense of being watched, but it never cohered. Orders did not collapse, panic did not spread. One pilot laughed hysterically over an open channel. Another recited song lyrics to drown out the noise. A third thought about nothing at all. The psionic wave broke apart against them like surf on jagged rock. Then the humans fired again. Plasma tore through the void, crude but overwhelming. One consensus vessel lost shielding, its crew stunned, not by damage but by disbelief. They had never trained for a battle where the enemy could not be silenced. "Fall back," came the first such order in centuries. The word echoed through the psionic network like a fracture. News spread fast. Too fast. Other species felt it immediately, not through reports but through disturbance. The chorus trembled. A dissonant note had entered the harmony, and it would not resolve. The consensus escalated. Psionic amplifiers were deployed, ancient relics meant to pacify entire worlds. Their activation warped local space with invisible force, intent made manifest. Human fleets entered the field. What happened next would later be described, inadequately, as interference. Human minds clustered together created something unprecedented. Not unity, but overlap. Individual chaos layered upon chaos, producing a fog the amplifiers could not penetrate. Psionic commands lost clarity. Signals echoed back distorted. Some psions screamed as feedback tore through their neural structures. "They're not resisting," an analyst cried. "They're jamming us." On human channels, the reports were confused. "I don't know what they're doing, but it's not working. I've got a headache, sir, but my hands still work. Permission to keep shooting." Permission was granted. For the first time, consensus ships were destroyed by purely physical means. Hulls ruptured. Crews died without ever understanding how the unthinkable had occurred. The humans did not cheer. They adapted. Seeing that their presence disrupted psionics, commanders began clustering ships intentionally. Civilian transports were rerouted into combat zones, not as shields but as anchors. Human thought density increased. The effect intensified. Entire psionic formations destabilized, collapsing into confusion. Orders contradicted themselves. Fleets hesitated at critical moments. And hesitation in war is fatal. By the time the consensus withdrew, the damage was done, not only to ships but to doctrine. Back in the resonance chambers, the chorus was wounded. Entire nodes went silent, others whispered in fear. "This is not war," an elder insisted. "This is an aberration." Thalion said nothing. He watched the recordings, human faces under fire, fear, anger, humor, sometimes all at once. No harmony, no shared mind. Only resolve. They fight without unity, Saleth whispered. How do they endure? Thalion answered quietly. They endure because nothing can be taken from them that they have not already learned to live without. On a distant human ship, a young officer stared at the wreckage drifting past the viewport. We beat them, someone said behind him, disbelief in their voice. The officer shook his head. No, he replied, we survived them. Beyond the stars, the consensus regrouped, struggling to comprehend a galaxy where thought itself could no longer guarantee control. The first unthinkable war had begun. Survival, however, was not victory. The consensus did not collapse after the first engagements. It adapted, not quickly but desperately. Entire psionic doctrines were rewritten in emergency conclaves, where once unity was strength, now distance became protection. Psions were pulled back from the front lines. Autonomous systems replaced living crews where possible. Fleets spread out, formations loosened, mental links thinned to the bare minimum. For the first time, the chorus learned restraint. Human commanders noticed immediately. They're scared, Admiral Kovac said, watching tactical projections bloom across the bridge. They're fighting like we do now. The war changed character. Without reliable psionics, the consensus relied on technology they had long neglected. Their ships were elegant but brittle, optimized for conflicts that never reached kinetic exchange. Human vessels were ugly by comparison, layered armor, redundant systems, brute force weapons. Attrition favored chaos. Battles became strange, uneven affairs. In some engagements, consensus fleets overwhelmed isolated human units with superior firepower. In others, proximity to dense human formations caused psionic systems to fail catastrophically. No pattern held for long. That uncertainty spread faster than casualties. Among the client species of the consensus, doubt took root. They had trusted the chorus to protect them, to end wars before blood was spilled. Now they watched recordings of burning ships and heard rumors of psions dying screaming, not from weapons, but from feedback. Some began to ask forbidden questions. If the consensus could be hurt, if harmony could fail, what else had been assumed eternal? Humanity did not exploit this directly. They were too busy trying not to die. On Earth and its colonies, the war fractured politics overnight. Old alliances cracked, reformed, cracked again. Protests erupted alongside recruitment drives. Philosophers argued on live feeds while factories worked without pause. There was no shared vision of the war. Only a shared refusal to submit. We don't know what they want, a civilian commentator said during a broadcast watched by billions. But we know what they can't do. That became the mantra. Human scientists worked feverishly not to understand psionics, but to map its absence. They discovered that human neural noise spiked under stress, humor, and conflicting emotions. Soldiers were trained accordingly. Some units encouraged constant chatter. Others played music into combat helmets. A few experimental battalions rotated conflicting orders deliberately, creating controlled confusion. The results were inconsistent. But when they worked, they were devastating. Consensus psions described it as standing near a storm made of thought. No lightning, no pattern, just endless pressure. Attempts to assert dominance dissolved into static. We are not losing battles, an elder insisted during a crisis council. We are losing context. Thalion felt the truth of it. The consensus had never fought an enemy it could not understand from the inside. Their greatest weapon, empathy weaponized into control, was useless. Worse than useless. It backfired. As casualties mounted, something else emerged. Human proximity did more than disrupt active psionics. Long-term exposure caused subtle changes. Psions stationed near the front reported intrusive thoughts, doubt, internal dialogue. One asked permission to disconnect from the chorus. Another laughed during a briefing and could not explain why. They were recalled immediately. The contamination is spreading, Soleth warned, not biologically, cognitively. The implication was unthinkable. If human thought patterns propagated, not as psionics but as ideas, then distance would not save them. The consensus issued its first absolute directive of the war. Avoid prolonged human contact at all costs. For the humans, that order sounded like hope. In one brutal engagement near a shattered moon, a surrounded human flotilla should have been annihilated. Instead, consensus ships hesitated, maintaining distance, their formations unraveling as psionic coordination failed at range. The humans charged, not because it was optimal, but because it was human. Afterward, among the wreckage, a human marine floated beside a dying alien vessel. Through the hull breach, he glimpsed an alien crew, confused, terrified, alone. For a moment, he wondered if this was what they had always felt. Alone in their own minds. The war ground on, neither side able to deliver a decisive blow. But something irreversible had occurred. The galaxy had learned that humanity could not be dominated. And the consensus had learned something worse. That the noise inside human minds was not random. It was adaptive. It was learning. Adaptation, once begun, did not stop. Humanity learned faster than the consensus could tolerate. What began as survival tactics hardened into doctrine. Commanders no longer treated human cognitive chaos as a side effect. It became a strategic asset. Fleets were reorganized not for elegance or efficiency, but for density. The closer humans were to one another, the less the enemy could think clearly. The consensus noticed too late. Psionic collapses increased in frequency. In several engagements, entire coordination webs failed simultaneously, leaving ships isolated, intact, armed, and useless. Panic followed, not because death was imminent, but because guidance was gone. For species raised within the chorus, silence was terror. A decisive confrontation emerged near the Kepri expanse, a region the consensus could not afford to lose. There, they committed an ancient weapon long kept in reserve, a psionic convergence engine capable of enforcing absolute coherence across a system. It activated. Space itself seemed to still, thought aligned. For a heartbeat, even human minds felt pressure, not control, but gravity. On human bridges, alarms screamed. Then the humans did something no simulation had predicted. They flooded the field. Civilian ships, cargo haulers, unarmed transports, thousands of human minds, afraid, angry, joking, praying, arguing, layered into the convergence zone. The engine strained. Psions screamed as contradictory impulses tore through the field. The enforced harmony fractured not outward but inward, collapsing in on itself. The convergence engine detonated, not explosively, but conceptually. Its operators lost the ability to synchronize, their minds forced into individuality for the first time. Many never recovered. The battle ended in silence. In the aftermath, the consensus did not pursue. They withdrew across the frontier in full view of every observing species. The war had not ended, but it had changed. In the High Conclave, Thalion addressed a diminished chorus. "We sought to impose unity upon chaos," he said. "Instead, chaos has revealed our dependence on unity." No one interrupted him. "We cannot defeat humanity through domination, nor through eradication without destroying ourselves in the process." An elder spoke, voice raw. "Then what remains?" Thalion paused. "Distance," he said, "and humility." The consensus issued a galaxy-wide communiqué, carefully worded, unprecedented. Humanity was no longer designated for integration, nor for extermination. They were declared a cognitively sovereign species. Contact would continue, but without psionic enforcement. Borders would be respected, influence withdrawn. Among the client species, the declaration spread like wildfire. Some rejoiced, some panicked, some began quietly to emulate humanity, disconnecting portions of their chorus, experimenting with individuality. On Earth, the announcement was met with confusion before celebration. There was no victory parade, no single narrative to agree upon. Only relief and unease. In a quiet observation chamber, Solith stood beside Thalion, gazing at a projection of human space, messy, expanding, alive. "They did not conquer us," Solith said. "They disrupted us." Thalion nodded. "They reminded us that consciousness does not require permission to exist." Far away, on a human colony still rebuilding from the war, a child asked her parent why the aliens had stopped coming. The parent thought for a moment. "Because," they said, "they finally listened." Above them, stars burned on, unchanged, indifferent. But the galaxy was no longer governed by a single voice. The first unthinkable war had not ended in victory or defeat. It had ended in uncertainty. And for the first time in millennia, the future was not harmonized. It was open.